My name is Caroline, and I'm 32 years old. Behind these words lies not just an age, but a whole life, cast in the mold of choices and consequences. A life I forged myself, without discounts or concessions. My creation, my fortress and stronghold, is a flower business in Austin, grown from nothing, from the bare ground of ambition and stubborn sweat. I have parents and a younger sister, Madison, who is now 18 and finishing high school. The 14-year age gap between us is not just a number. It is a chasm separating two different childhoods, two universes, two understandings of the word family. Before we continue, I am very curious. What country are you from, dear listeners? Write in the comments where you are listening from. And now, get comfortable. We're starting. I caught my parents young and unsteady. We weren't destitute, but we didn't wallow in luxury either. We lived modestly, within our means. And then, when I turned 14, Madison appeared in their lives. And as if by magic, she became the sun around which the entire family galaxy began to revolve. They looked at her as a miracle, as a priceless gift they had been waiting for their whole lives. And I, their eldest daughter, quietly and uncomplainingly transformed from a child into an assistant, into a support. At 15, I was sat down at the kitchen table and told it was time for me to get a job. That's how I ended up at a local grocery store, where after school I bagged groceries and stocked shelves, breathing in the smell of freshness and other people's lives. I gave almost my entire salary to my parents, for bills, for diapers, for jars of baby food. I remember bringing home my first stack of worn-out bills. Mom didn't say thank you. She didn't say she was proud of me. Her words were imprinted in my memory like a cold coin. This is what family does. It's your responsibility. Meanwhile, Madison grew up swaddled in care, free from worries. At 15, she didn't have a job. At 16, for her birthday, she was given a BMW convertible. My parents, in some incomprehensible way, managed to find the money for it. At my 16, I spent the whole summer mowing lawns, scraping the skin on my palms raw to save up for a used MacBook that I needed for school. I spent 4 months under the scorching Texas sun, coming home with grass-stained clothes and blisters sticking to my skin. Madison, however, got a brand new car as if it were only natural, as if it weren't a reward, but something taken for granted. But the real storm broke 4 years ago when my father had a stroke. He was only 52, and the blow struck him as if from nowhere. Yesterday, healthy. Today, in a hospital bed, half paralyzed. He mostly recovered, but he couldn't return to his previous job. His income, which had been the backbone of the family, simply evaporated. And then I stepped onto the stage. My flower business had existed for only a year at that point. Things were going okay, but not brilliantly, just normal. Seeing my parents drowning in debt, I offered help. I opened a joint account at Wells Fargo. I was the primary owner, and I added them as co-owners. I set it up so that for large transfers, my approval was required. But for everyday expenses, they could use it freely. I started putting money into it every month, for groceries, for utilities, for my father's medical bills, for everything else. For the entire first year, I vigilantly monitored every transaction. Every expense was logical and justified. $150 for groceries, $200 for electricity, $80 for another of my father's checkups, mundane, necessary things. I was sincerely happy to help. I felt I was doing the right thing, the adult thing. But then my business suddenly and powerfully took off. I signed a contract with a hotel chain to decorate their lobbies, then with a group of restaurants, and then with corporate offices. I was working 70 hours a week, managing employees, meeting with clients, immersing myself in endless orders and arrangements. I stopped checking our joint account so meticulously. I trusted my parents, and that was my fatal mistake. I started noticing the first warning signs about a year ago. Madison began posting photos on Instagram in expensive clothes, with Gucci and Prada bags, visiting trendy restaurants where a single dish cost $50, traveling to Miami, Los Angeles, and New York, all while supposedly being a poor high school student. To my hesitant questions, my mother evasively replied, "Her friends are treating her," or She's saving her allowance. I didn't press, though I should have. Mom also started calling more often with requests for additional financial help. The roof was leaking, the car broke down, medical expenses had increased. She never went into details, simply stated that they needed help, and I transferred more money. I was absorbed in the business. I trusted them. I didn't ask unnecessary questions. And then came the morning that changed everything. I was in a very important business meeting. For several months, I had been trying to secure a contract with a major wedding and event planning company. It would have meant stable orders worth at least $200,000 a year. I was sitting across from the CEO and the operations manager, flipping through my portfolio, when my phone vibrated. Madison was calling. I declined the call and continued the presentation. She called again. I declined again, apologizing to the clients. Then a message came. I glanced at the screen and almost choked. I need you to send me $5,000 for the prom. I stared at the text, thinking it was a typo. Do you mean 500? I quickly replied. No, 5,000. I need a designer dress, a limo, professional photos, spa treatments, hair, makeup, manicure. It's important. I couldn't believe my eyes. Get a job and earn it yourself, I replied, put my phone on silent, and finished the meeting. The contract was signed, the papers were processed, handshakes were exchanged, but my thoughts were elsewhere. When I got into the car, there were already 6 new messages, 3 from Madison, 2 from my mom, 1 from my dad. Mom wrote, Madison has studied so hard all year. Don't be selfish. You can afford it. Dad echoed, paying for your sister's prom is the right thing to do. Don't disappoint us. Madison left a voice message with cold undertones. Caroline, seriously, it's just a prom. I'm not asking for a car or anything. Why can't you help me just this once? You're so selfish. You have a business, you have money, and you can't spare $5,000 for your own sister? What's wrong with you? I sat in the car in the parking lot, and a suffocating wave of rage rose in my chest. I had been helping them for 4 years. I had been paying for groceries, utilities, medical bills, home and car repairs, absolutely everything. I had been supporting the entire family while simultaneously building my own business. And she claimed I never helped. I dialed my mom. She answered after the first ring. Caroline, thank God. Did you get my messages? She started immediately. Yes, I did. What's going on? I asked, gripping the steering wheel. Madison wants $5,000 for her prom. She deserves a nice celebration. You only graduate from high school once. I couldn't help but laugh. A dry, bitter laugh with no trace of joy. Mom, my voice sounded cold and even. I graduated too. Tell me, did you spend $5,000 on my prom? A tense silence hung on the other end of the line. That was a completely different time, she finally replied, and familiar defensive notes sounded in her voice. We didn't have the money then. But you don't have it now, I exclaimed, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. It's my money, and I'm not spending $5,000 on a dress and a limo for my sister. You just don't want to help your sister, my mother's voice trembled. You can afford it. You have your own business. You said yourself that families should help in difficult times. And does a difficult time include designer dresses and limousines? I asked sharply. In response, there were short beeps. She had hung up. 5 minutes later, a message came from my father. It was an ultimatum, written in dry, formal language. Either you pay for Madison's prom, or you are no longer considered part of this family. I stared at those words for a full minute, feeling the ground disappear from under my feet. No longer part of the family. After everything I had done, after 4 years of financial support, after the stolen adolescence I had sacrificed to help raise Madison, after countless transfers and sacrifices. The next morning, barely awake, I saw a notification from Wells Fargo. It was 7 a.m, and I was already lying awake. A request for an external transfer of $5,000 is pending approval from the primary account owner. Someone had tried to transfer the money without my knowledge. The transfer was frozen and awaiting my authorization. I sat up in bed, feeling my heart pounding wildly in my chest. They had actually tried to steal that money. They had acted behind my back, trying to drain our joint account. I dialed my mom. She answered immediately, which told me she had been waiting for my call. "Caroline, about that transfer," she began without preamble. "We just needed to transfer some money to pay some bills and for some repairs. Just approve it, and we'll discuss the details later." "Bills and repairs? Or Madison's prom?" I asked. Silence fell on the line. "Mom, tell me the truth." "Fine," she exhaled. "It's for Madison's prom. She needs it, Caroline. Just approve the transfer." "No," I said firmly. "I won't approve it." I hung up and quickly got dressed. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to turn to. Jacob, my college friend, now a lawyer. We had kept in touch all these years, and I trusted him implicitly. On the way to his office, I dialed his number. "I need your help analyzing bank statements," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm afraid my family is robbing me." "Come to my office," he replied without further questions. "Bring everything you have." 2 hours later, we were sitting in his austere conference room with a printout of 4 years of transaction history on the table. Jacob opened his laptop and began methodically examining the debits. "Okay," he said, typing. "Let's see what we have here." At first, everything looked normal. Grocery stores, utility companies, medical bills. But then his fingers froze. Tiffany and Company, $3,200. Nordstrom, $1,800. Another Nordstrom, $2,100. Travel agency, $4,500. And another one, $3,800. I felt a chill inside. Jacob continued, and his voice grew drier. "Credit card payments. Looks like they were paying off their debts from your account. Multiple transactions." We scrolled through all 4 years, every entry. When Jacob finished the calculations, he looked at me with unconcealed shock. "Caroline, they spent over $75,000 of your money, and judging by the descriptions, almost not a cent of it went to household expenses." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. $75,000, an amount exceeding my income for the first 2 years of the business. That could have been a down payment on a house. That could have been a future. "All those urgent calls," I said slowly, tasting bitterness in my mouth. Mom had always talked about repairs and medical bills. They had lied. "It seems so." "Jacob is right," my inner voice mercilessly stated the facts. "They were funding your sister's lifestyle. Look at the dates. The Nordstrom purchases coincide with her Instagram posts. The travel agency payment right before the trip to Miami." I felt nauseous. For 4 years, I had worked myself to the bone, denying myself vacations, wearing the same clothes, cramming into a tiny apartment to save, while they spent my money on designer bags and trips. "What should I do?" I asked, and my voice sounded lost. "First, a direct conversation," Jacob said, his tone firm and emotionless. "Then you close the account. You are the primary owner. It's your legal right." I printed out every transaction. Every Tiffany receipt, every Nordstrom payment, every flight booking, every credit card transfer. Gathering everything into a hefty folder, I drove to my parents' house. It was 3 p.m. when I knocked on the familiar door. Mom opened it, and her face fell when she saw the folder in my hands. "Caroline, what are you doing here?" Her voice trembled. "We all need to talk." My father and Madison were in the living room. I walked in and threw the folder onto the coffee table. Papers fanned out. "What is this?" my father asked sternly. "This is the history of our joint account for 4 years. I checked every transaction with my lawyer." My mother's face turned white. "You had no right to invade our privacy like that," she exclaimed. "Your privacy?" I asked coldly. "It's my money, and you spent $75,000 on things that have nothing to do with household expenses." "That's not true," my mother tried to deny, but her voice sounded weak and unconvincing. I picked up one of the sheets from the floor. "Tiffany & Co., $3,200. What emergency was that?" Silence hung in response. "Nordstrom, $1,800. Was that Dad's medical bills?" Madison theatrically crossed her arms. "You're so dramatic." "Dramatic?" my patient snapped. You've been living off me for years while I worked myself to exhaustion. Every urgent call from Mom was a lie. You weren't paying bills. You were buying designer clothes and funding vacations." My father heaved himself up from his chair. "We raised you. You owe us. It's the least you can do." "I owe you?" I couldn't believe my ears. "I've been supporting this family for 4 years. I gave everything to help you, and you turned my help into your entitlement." Mom took a step forward, shielding Madison. "Everything we did for Madison. She deserves a good start in life. She deserves more than we could give her." There it was, the core truth. Madison deserved more than me. She was always worthier. "It's just money," Madison shrugged, looking at me with an empty gaze. "Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" I looked at her, at this spoiled 18-year-old girl who had never worked a day in her life, for whom $75,000 was just money. "It's not just about the money," I said quietly, and my voice sounded tired and hopeless. In those words was the bitterness of 4 stolen years, weighing heavily on my shoulders. Every refusal, every sacrifice, every hour stolen from my own life, they had easily turned it all into their rightful due. "Caroline," my father began, but I cut him off sharply. "I've had enough. I won't give you a single cent. Not for the prom, not for college, not for anything else." I turned around and walked out, slamming the door. But through the wood and glass, I could still hear their shouts. "Selfish! Ungrateful! Traitor!" I heard every cry, every reproach, echoing in my soul. Without wasting a minute, I drove home, called the bank, and closed the joint account. As the primary owner, I had every right to do so. The operator's voice sounded indifferent and mechanical as he revoked my parents' access, froze their cards, and transferred the remaining balance to my personal account. Then I sent a final message to the family group chat. "The joint account is closed. Do not contact me again." I blocked all their numbers, Mom's, Dad's, Madison's. For the first time in 4 years, I could take a truly deep breath, feeling a strange, unfamiliar sense of freedom. The next day, I was working in my studio, arranging flowers for a new composition, when I heard an insistent, angry knock on the door. I looked out the window and saw my parents. I didn't open it. Instead, I turned on music, loud, almost deafening, and continued working, plunging my hands into the coolness of greenery and petals. They knocked harder. I heard my father shouting something through the glass, but the music swallowed the words. Mom was shouting something too, her face contorted in a grimace of anger. They stayed at the door for about 20 minutes before giving up and leaving. Then the calls started. Not from them, I had cut them off, but from relatives. The first to call was Aunt Carol. "Carolyn, your mother told me what you did. How could you do this to your family?" Her voice trembled with indignation. "Aunt Carol, they spent $75,000 on designer clothes and vacations while telling me it was for medical bills. They lied to me for 4 years. Silence fell on the other end of the line. I didn't know. "Now you do, and please, don't call me about this again." Then it was Uncle Mike, then Aunt Diana, Cousin Rachel. My mother had deployed her weapon, the family artillery, spreading her version of events where I was the callous, ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family in their time of need. To each of them, I calmly and methodically laid out the truth. The joint account, the $75,000, the fraudulent spending, the lies about emergencies. Some apologized, some didn't believe me. I asked everyone to leave me alone. After a week, the calls stopped. I changed the locks on the door in case they still had a key, and installed the Ring video doorbell to know if they showed up again. They didn't. Life settled into a new, quiet, peaceful, and in its own way, strange rhythm. My business continued to grow. Without the constant financial drain, I finally had funds to reinvest. I hired 2 new employees, bought a new delivery van, and upgraded equipment. I started sleeping better at night. For 3 months, I heard nothing from my family. Absolute, deafening silence. And to be honest, those were the best 3 months in years. Then my cousin Mason called. one of the few who had stayed in touch and believed me. His voice was serious, lacking its usual casualness. "Caroline, I thought you should know. Your parents, they haven't been paying the mortgage. They couldn't make the payments. The bank foreclosed. They had to move to a small apartment on the other side of town." I listened to him, and the words fell like heavy stones. Last week, my father had filed for bankruptcy. I expected to feel triumph, or, conversely, pity, but I felt nothing, just an emptiness resembling numbness. "And that's not all," Mason continued. "Madison got a job at Target, works part-time at the checkout." "Good for her," I said, and there was no irony in my voice. I truly thought so. Maybe a drop of real work would teach her something. "She must not be thrilled. She'd been telling everyone you were going to pay for her tuition at some expensive private college. Now she's talking about community college." After talking to Mason, I sat on the couch, turning over what I had heard in my head. My parents had lost their home, gone bankrupt. Madison, the princess in designer clothes, was working for minimum wage. Their world had collapsed the moment I stopped propping it up. And it proved one simple, bitter truth. It had never been a family. It was a dependency, skillfully disguised as kinship. They needed my money, not me. Meanwhile, my business continued to gain momentum. I signed a new major contract with a downtown hotel, and then a country club entrusted me with all their events. My income doubled. I moved to a larger space with a bigger warehouse and a real office. I started dating Marcus, the owner of a coffee shop 2 blocks from my store. We met when he came in to buy flowers for his sister's birthday. Our interaction was easy and pleasant. He knew nothing about my family drama, and I wasn't in a hurry to bring it up. I became friends with other small business owners in our area. On Fridays, we would get together, have a drink, discuss marketing, suppliers, and the difficulties of management. They became my new community, my people. 8 months after my break with my family, on a Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee on the porch when a familiar car pulled up to the house. My mom and Madison got out. I watched as they nervously walked up my driveway. I didn't open the door. I just waited. Mom knocked quietly, almost timidly. I opened it, but didn't invite them in. "Carolyn," my mom began, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" "What do you want?" "I want to apologize. We were wrong. We took advantage of your kindness, and we shouldn't have." I waited in silence, knowing this was just the prelude. "But it's not just that. Your father had another stroke. A smaller one, but the bills are piling up, and we lost the house. We are in a desperate situation, Caroline, a very desperate one." She took an envelope out of her purse. "This is a list of our debts: credit cards, medical bills, back rent. We need help, one last time, just to get back on our feet." Madison stepped forward. Her expression was studied, unnatural. "I'm sorry too, Carolyn. I didn't understand how hard you worked. Now I get it." I looked at them, at my mother with her desperate eyes and the envelope full of debts, and at my sister acting out a rehearsed scene of remorse. "No," came my firm and final reply. "I won't give you a single cent." The mask of humility instantly slipped from Madison's face, replaced by a grimace of pure hatred. "You greedy bitch! You have money and we have nothing! You betrayed your family! What kind of person are you?" she shouted. "One who is tired of being used," I replied calmly. "You never learned the value of work because you always got everything handed to you on a silver platter. Well, you're learning now, and you don't like it. But it's not my problem anymore." I closed the door and turned the key, cutting off their voices, their demands, their lies. Silence fell. They stood on my porch for another minute, their silent backs more eloquent than any words, and then slowly walked away. That night, I slept with an unusual lightness, without the familiar weight on my soul. I had finally realized a simple truth. I wasn't robbing anyone. I had simply stopped allowing myself to be robbed. After that visit from my mom and Madison, complete silence fell. No unexpected appearances on the doorstep, no calls from relatives urging me to come to my senses and show compassion. Just silence. And you know what? That silence was wonderful. It was filled not with emptiness, but with peace. I continued to pour energy into my business, and it responded with rapid growth. A year after I was left without a family, my income tripled. I hired 5 more employees and opened a second store in a prestigious part of the city. My success story was published in a local business magazine, listing me among Austin's rising entrepreneurs under 35. In the interview, I was asked about the secret to my success, and I told the truth. Not the personal one, but the philosophical one. I realized that you cannot build something solid by constantly depleting yourself, I said. You have to protect your resources, be it money, time, or emotional strength, and invest them wisely. The reporter highlighted that phrase in bold next to my photo. My relationship with Marcus was becoming more serious. A year had passed, we had met each other's friends, I had visited his family in San Antonio. His parents, owners of a cozy restaurant, welcomed me with such warmth, as if my presence was valuable in itself, and my thoughts and dreams mattered. At first, being in the atmosphere of a healthy family felt unfamiliar, but I gradually learned the feeling. I told Marcus about my past one evening over a glass of wine. He listened without interrupting, and then said something that stuck deep within me. You didn't abandon them. They abandoned you a long time ago. You just finally noticed it. He was right. They abandoned me when I was 15 and made me get a job while Madison got everything handed to her on a silver platter. They abandoned me every time they prioritized her needs over mine. They finally abandoned me when they lied about emergencies to appropriate my money. I was just the last one to leave. Sometimes I thought about my sister. Madison must be 19, maybe 20 now, probably still working at Target, maybe even went to college. Maybe she learned something, the value of work, responsibility, or maybe not. In any case, it was no longer my concern. I thought about my parents, too, about my father with his compromised health, about my mother, left alone with her regrets. Somewhere deep down, I felt sorry for them. They were not young, they were scared. Their future seemed vague and uncomfortable. But then I remembered those $75,000. I remembered every lie, every manipulation, every time they made me feel guilty for not doing enough, even though I was giving everything. And the feeling of pity dissolved like smoke. I was sometimes asked, by friends, acquaintances, even some employees who had heard fragments of my story, if I regretted my decision. But they're your family, they would say. Or don't you miss them? The answer was always the same. No, I didn't miss the constant stress. I didn't miss the anxious calls and the feeling of eternal guilt. I didn't miss the role of the invisible one who was only needed as a payment method. I didn't lose a family. I got rid of a duty, skillfully disguised as love. And I gained something immeasurably more valuable, genuine, deep, unclouded peace of mind. I woke up every morning, and the first thing I felt was not the familiar weight of anxiety, but a calm, steady confidence permeating my entire being, like the soft morning light flooding the bedroom. I checked my bank account without my heart skipping a beat, seeing in the numbers not a potential threat, but a resource for new achievements. And I made plans for the future without looking back at the phantom deaths and fictional crises of those who were once called my family. 2 years after I finally severed those ties, I bought a house. A real house, with a foundation that supported my present and future, not a temporary shelter. 3 bedrooms, a cozy backyard, and a spacious garage for my delivery van, which had become a symbol of my independence. We closed the deal in March, and Marcus, whose support was quiet and unobtrusive, helped me move and arrange the belongings that filled the space with my spirit, not someone else's. Unpacking boxes in the kitchen, among the crystal and porcelain, he asked softly, not disturbing the harmony of the moment, "Will you tell them about the house?" "No," I replied without a shadow of a doubt, and it was the absolute truth. They are no longer part of my life. "Okay," he said, and his kiss on the top of my head was a seal of acceptance and understanding. I planted a garden in the backyard, planting roses, tulips, daisies, and lavender with my own hands, their scents mingling into a single bouquet symbolizing peace and a new beginning. It was my personal space, where I spent evenings with a glass of wine, contemplating what I had built with my own hands, and feeling a previously unfamiliar sensation, pure, unclouded pride. Not the kind that requires external approval, but a quiet, deep satisfaction from the awareness of the path traveled and the heights reached. Everything I had achieved was the fruit of my efforts. No one gave me a BMW at 16, paid for vacations in Miami, or handed me $75,000 for a life I hadn't earned. I worked, sacrificed immediate joys, and created something from nothing. And when my fortress was attacked by those who were supposed to be its stronghold, I found the strength to say no. And it wasn't selfishness, but an act of self-respect that gave me freedom. Sometimes I wondered if Madison ever understood that her previous life was an illusion, built on the foundation of my money and sweat. If she realized that her parents, by showering her with gifts, had actually done her a disservice by not teaching her to stand on her own 2 feet. But what was truly important was that over time, I almost stopped thinking about them. 3 years after the break, while at a business conference in Dallas, I ran into Aunt Carol in the hotel lobby. She looked aged and tired, but recognized me immediately. "Caroline," she said with slight embarrassment, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm speaking on a panel discussion about small business growth," I replied, and she, despite past disagreements, couldn't hide a spark of impression in her eyes. "Your mom sometimes talks about you," she noted cautiously. "She tells people you're doing well." "Really?" I asked, and my voice didn't tremble. "She's proud of you, even if she can't say it to your face." She had years to say it, but she chose silence. Aunt Carol nodded slowly. "I know. I told her she was wrong in how she treated you." "That counts for something," I acknowledged, but not enough to change anything. We talked for a few more minutes about neutral things, politely said goodbye, and went our separate ways. That evening, calling Marcus from my hotel room, I told him about the meeting. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Nothing," I replied, and it was the pure truth. I don't feel anything. It was at that moment that I realized, with absolute clarity, that I had made the only right choice. Hanging up, I went to the window and looked out at the night panorama of Dallas, shimmering with lights of opportunity. Somewhere out there, in Austin, my parents were scraping by, and Madison was probably still standing behind the checkout at Target. They were managing without me somehow, and I finally allowed myself to believe it. And meanwhile, I was speaking at conferences, managing 2 thriving flower shops, and building a future with a man who loved me, not my resources. I didn't abandon them. I saved myself. And looking back, I knew I would do it again without a second thought.